gentlemen, Michael Malice here. Let that be your welcome for the next hour. We have with us, once again, as part of our mashup episodes with Part of the Problem and You're Welcome, it's Dave Smith, one of the Legion of Skanks, host of Part of the Problem, good buddy of mine. The response I've been getting to these episodes has been universally positive and more than usual. People have been making a point to be like, thanks for doing this. A few of the comments were people who are triggered and upset. So from my perspective, I'm batting 1,000.
Well, that is the good thing about being half troll, half sincere, is that you always win.
Yeah, I'm putting on my headphones. Yeah. It's not bad being Michael Malice, I gotta say. Is it good? It must be good being Dave Smith too.
Of course, I get to talk to Michael Malice a couple times a week.
You're a modern day Tom Woods. So I put it in my group, malice.locals.com. I said, what do you guys want to hear us talk about? And the question they had, the suggestion they had most often is something that doesn't make sense to me at all on any level. They want to hear what kind of music we like to listen to. And I don't ever care what music someone likes. And in fact, I feel like it's all downside. Because if I know someone and I like their stuff, and then I learn that they're, like progressive rock or like Porcupine Tree, then I think, okay, you are really just a cretin.
Yeah, I don't know. I kind of feel the same way. I'm really never interested. Like, I don't care what kind of music you like or anyone else likes. To be honest, I have a 1-year-old. So these days I've been listening to a lot of like kids music. Like I've been listening to Raffi a lot lately.
Oh, okay. The Wheels on the Bus, huh?
Yeah, solid tune.
What about Baby Shark?
Oh my God, she loves it. Oh my God, it literally makes you want to put a bullet in your brain. But yeah, kids respond to it. I don't know why. She really likes it.
I think because it's an easy song to sing along to.
She's not singing along.
The beat, she understands the beat.
Yeah, I think it's simple and easy, and then they like that kind of feeling of they've mastered something.
Yeah, and repetition. That's what the Teletubbies used to do. They would have the same thing over and over.
Yeah, I'll tell you, thank God for Sesame Street, because if you're stuck watching something for a very little kid, Sesame Street at least created something that's not so brutal to watch.
What about Fraggle Rock?
Haven't gotten her into that yet.
It's really good. It's really watchable. The Muppet Show is watchable.
Yeah, we gotta do the Muppets. I've watched a few like Muppets videos on YouTube, but we got to do some more of that.
You don't want to have her watching. Okay, so this lets me bring up something that has triggered me since I was like 8, and it's a lot of fun because a lot of times you're like, I'm triggered, but I'm just a dumb kid, and then you grow up and you're like, no, I was a smart kid. Like this was my big red pill moment. So, and I didn't realize the history of this. So I'm a bit older than you. I'm in my 50s. But when I was a kid, there was a show called Masters of the Universe, and it was He-Man versus Skeletor and all of them. And at the end of every episode, there would have like a lesson where He-Man or Teela or Man-at-Arms would basically talk to each other to the kids and spread, communist propaganda. And I didn't realize at the time that before the 80s, there were a couple of things that were illegal, and don't take my word for it, but I'm 99% I'm getting this all right. That you couldn't have TV shows that were toy inspired. Like now, when you and I were kids, if you bought cereal, it would have a toy inside. Now that's illegal because
Really?
that's brainwashing kids to encourage their parents to buy like tricks. Excuse me. That's number one. Yeah. So that's why I don't toys inside cereal anymore. Number 2 is they couldn't have any violence, even like cartoon fighting. So when that changed, they're like, all right, we'll let you have like, they can throw them into the vat of mud, but they have to have this pro-social message at the end.
What?
And the one message that really drove me crazy as a kid and still continues to drive me crazy, there was an episode of the Ghostbusters, and not the Ghostbusters from the show, for the movie. There was a fake Ghostbusters, right? Filmation's Ghostbusters. And it was a gorilla and 2 guys. And they're fighting, I forgot the main, something Prime was the bad guy's name. And there was an episode where they had to have a race, right? And the bad guys cheated, of course. And they're winning and winning and winning. And then right before the finish line, they run out of gas. And then the good guys overtake them. And they're saying, look, the lesson is don't cheat. It's like, no, the lesson is check your fucking gas. and cheat intelligently, you fucking idiots, they would have won. It's not at all a given that they would have lost. And this drove me crazy.
Yeah.
And in fact, I thought, okay, whatever, maybe you have to lie to the kids. I was in college and I did a semester at American University, or the American University. There's a controversy over the article. And the teacher, it was a business class, divided us all up. And half of us were the seller of a product and half of us wanted to purchase the product, right? And we had to figure out what the price would be, but I only knew what I could pay and you only knew what it would cost you. So let's suppose it cost me 200, right? And the other person, it was, they could pay 800, to split the difference be 500. I lied and said, look, this is costing me $400. And the guy would be like, oh, well, I can pay 8. I'm like, let's split the difference. And we get it to 6, right? Which is $100 more than everyone else who was honest. And we went around the class, and I wasn't the only one who did this trick. Like, other people lied about what they could pay. And the teacher just literally completely ignored the lesson of the experiment. And he goes, well, that's a bad idea if you're dealing with someone long-term. I'm like, when is someone long-term going to have information about your costs or your ability to pay for a product? And when would they expect you to sit down and be like, hey, Dave, I want to buy shirts from you. Here's my balance sheet. Like, here's what it was like, oh, like, and this is a good reason being an anarchist. It's like, they will go through an experiment like voting if it gives them the result they want. But the second the result is not what they want to demonstrate, it's blatantly and publicly thrown out the window.
Yes, no, that's an excellent point, and you see a whole lot of that with the last and the current presidential election.
Oh yeah.
But it's infuriating. Like, you just ran an experiment, and you're not even going to look at what your experiment just proved. You're just going to discard it. I'll tell you though that
and shamelessly.
Yes, that what you were touching on really bothers me too, and like really bothers me. That bothers me so much that I have to like have a moment of introspection and be like, why does this piss me off so much? And I think what it is, and I was talking about this on an episode a few months ago, but there's something about propaganda targeted at children that I just find to be the most despicable thing in the universe. It's so much worse than trying to propagandize adults, because children are inherently vulnerable to these messages. And I hate it. I hate lying to kids. I mean, there's a role for lying to like very, very young kids, like 4 and under, like white lies that will comfort them. You know, everything's going to be okay. You're not going to get hurt. Everything works out in the end. That there's a role for that. But I remember already being like 7, something like that, and being like really feeling really insulted by the lies of adults. Like, you're like, I see through this bullshit. There was a Joan Rivers quote that she had that I thought was so brilliant, where she said like, I've never understood lying to kids. She's like, why do we do that? It doesn't make the world a better place. She goes, they tell kids these things like looks don't matter. And she's like, okay, tell that to the fat girl who can't get a date for prom. You think telling her looks don't matter are going to make her feel better? Yeah. Why don't you be honest with her? Why don't you tell her, hey, guess what? Looks matter a lot. So try to look your best. Like, there's something, and I'll tell you, the one that drives me crazy the most, that used to piss me off so much, that they say to high schoolers, they go, you can be anything you want to in this world. That's such bullshit, man. Why would you lie to kids?
There's a bigger lie than that. Well, first of all, I'm going to go back to the He-Man. There was an episode, and I went back to it, and I was writing the new right, where the episode ends, and She-Ra, I think it's She-Ra, literally says, I don't remember if it was the person saying this in this episode. I know that's the character's name. Says, a tree has as much right to live as a human being. And this is the most extreme, psychotic, like, even Greta Thunberg's not going to be saying this. And they're saying this to kids. The biggest lie that I believed, and it took me until I was well into my adulthood to be like, oh, this is a really pernicious lie. If you just be yourself, people will like you. That is the biggest, and especially people who like me and you, like our audience, I'm telling you, do not be yourself. Because people will not know how to respond, and they will be angry at you, and they'll be contemptuous, and they'll be hostile, and you won't understand what's going wrong. And it's them, it's not you, but you don't have the space or the social standing to realize this, and you've been lied to growing up. So get that into your head.
Don't be yourself. And the message shouldn't be especially to young people, be yourself and people will like you. It's like, no, make yourself into somebody people will like.
Yeah, oh yeah,
That's
that's
what
a
you
great.
want to
Yeah,
do. That's what you want to do in life. Yourself, we're all incredibly flawed. You're supposed to work on that, not just accept that and love it. And honesty is not the best policy, and not
right.
in lots of situations. You would be a psychotic person if you were always honest. And like, you know, if there's somebody whose face you don't like, you don't just tell them, I don't like your face. Like, you're not always supposed to be honest. Well, maybe sometimes you do that, but and that's even like the one I was saying before. This is what it's not even just that these are people benefit from us telling them these lies. These lies actually hurt people.
Yeah.
Like, I don't understand why you would ever tell a high schooler you can be anything you want to in this world if you just set your mind to it. Well, no, you can't. You can't be LeBron James if you set your mind to
Right.
it. You can't be anything you want to be.
You
So
can't
be
even you
honest.
can't even be Lewis.
Yeah, yeah. You know how hard it is? Lewis has to get up and be Lewis every single day.
That's a
You
lot
know
of
how
work.
much? Oh my God. It's an ungodly amount of work to be Lewis 24/7. But why wouldn't you say, like, if you say this to like kids, like a more honest message would be something like, it'd be like, look, you can't be anything. So if you find something that you're really good at, that you enjoy doing, put everything you can into that, because now you've actually found something you can do. That's just
There's
an honest message that's actually helpful.
there's something Americans do, and as someone who's born in another country and was raised in kind of a different culture, is just mind-boggling to me. And every time I see it, I'm just like, this is really naive and stupid. It's both. I remember there was this group, I didn't even know what it's called, where basically some guy who's a business type, and he would get like 20 people once a month into his apartment, and people would go around talking about what problems they had, and everyone would give them advice, right? And since it's strangers, like, and there was someone who's having an issue at work, and the advice people had was like, oh, just sit down and talk to them. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, okay, the most obvious visceral thing is not advice. If someone is asking me for advice and I'm going to say what very clearly their first reaction was, I'm of no use. I'm just an asshole running my mouth and giving no one any benefit, even more so than usual. Number one. Number two is, like, as another example, I talked about this on a live stream. I had a leaky sink, and it was kind of annoying. You know, I had to have like a bowl under the bathroom sink for a while. And people in live stream are like, just go sit and talk to your landlord. I'm like, do you not understand? I have a good rent. If I sit down and complain, and sure, he'll pay for the plumber, but then if the plumber's $200 and my rent's up $200 next month, am I really coming out ahead instead of me just paying for the plumber? And they do not think in these terms. They do not think in terms that people, and that's a kind of a different example, but especially in the office, they do not appreciate that people tend to be very vindictive and engage in very heavy retribution, and you'll never see it coming because you were taught, and in your family, it was probably the case that if you sat down with your grandma or sat down with your brother and like, or your bros, and that's true. If me and you had an issue, we sat down and be like, oh, here's the situation. We'd be like, yeah, it hash out, we have a hug, and it would be, our friendship would be stronger. But that's not how it is in corporate America. Like, they will feel they're not in a space to retaliate to your face, and they have to like respond in kind, and they'll have that talk. But a lot of them will never forget it, and they will make sure to get you back in some way. And the advice I gave, and they looked at me like a crazy person, like in that room, and I stand by this advice. What I would do in that situation, if I had a coworker who was being really exceptionally difficult and annoying, is, I, being Jewish, I would poison the well against them. I would make it a point that whenever they did a problem, to point it out to people, be like, oh, that's weird, blah, 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 Kevin fucked this up again, and have that person develop a reputation, and now they're in a really weakened position, and if the layoffs come, they're the first to go. That's how you handle a bad coworker, because a bad coworker does not have the capacity usually to be a good coworker. They think they're doing a good job. So even if you sit them down, 9 times out of 10, they're going to be like, you're picking on me. And even if not, they're going to resent that you force them to acknowledge their flaws.
Right.
It's not a
what
good
are
position.
And what are the odds that you're going to become this person's successful psychoanalyst, and you're going to like rewire them and convince them of all of their pathologies and how they interact with people? I mean, this is fantasy, like, right, nonsense. And no, it's, you know, there's something interesting about like good advice, genuinely good advice usually sounds a bit harsh.
Yeah.
Like something that you really need. It usually kind of smacks you and you're like, ah, shit. That's good advice. It hurt a little bit to get that, you know, like it's stuff like you got to take a look in the mirror, or you got to do this, or you got to do something hard. Whereas what we've fallen in love with are things that just sound nice.
Yeah.
Did you ever, there's this really fantastic book by this author, Jean Twenge or Twenge. I don't
Don't
know
know
how you
her.
pronounce it.
Okay.
I've only read it. I've never heard it said. But she wrote this book called Generation Me, and it's all about like narcissism in our current generation, and how incredibly like self-centered children are raised today, and all this stuff. Really, really wonderful book. I highly recommend it. And she went at one, I forget what it was, I think it was the second or third chapter in the book, where she started talking about these kind of uh like sayings from different generations, and how from like her grandparents' generation to today's, the sayings like used to be these kind of like harsh like tough truths. Like they would tell women, like, you know, things like, if you give the milk away, no one's going to want to buy the cow, you know, like things like that, where it was kind of like, hey, you know, if you have a whole lot of sexual partners, a lot of men aren't going to want to
Yeah,
be
yeah.
with someone who had a whole lot of sexual partners, so deal with that. It was all like, wash your hands with soap and water. Like all the advice was kind of harsh. And then like today they say these things that just sound nice but are just terrible. Like, you got to love yourself before you can love anyone else. And she was like, you know, by the way, there's no social scientific evidence to back that up. And like, it turns out that people who love themselves too much actually have a really hard time loving
Yeah.
other people. And there's just so many things like that whole topic fascinates me. And I think there is something like, if something just sounds so empty and shallow and doesn't ruffle any feathers, it's not good life advice.
One of the best essays I've ever read is by this guy named, I believe, Josh Olson for The Village Voice, and it's called "I Will Not Read Your Fucking Screenplay," because he was a successful screenwriter, and he goes, "Here's the deal. You're a dentist. I won't ask you to do fillings for me. If you're a lawyer, I won't ask you to read over this contract. I won't ask you to paint my house if you're a painter, and you don't ask me to work for you for free." And he goes, "It's not even that I resent that it took me so long and so much hours to get to this point, and this would take up hours of my time that I could be generating money or spending time with my friends and jerking off." You know what I
Right.
mean? What you don't actually want advice. You want validation. You want me to tell you did a great job and stick to it and blah 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 blah. I have had people come to me, and I'll give, actually, this is great advice, and it's easy for I avoid giving advice at all costs, because for me, I will only give advice if I know someone fairly well, or I'll give it if I'm speaking generalities. I can't speak to someone individually, and I'll give that advice if I'm, with a fair degree of confidence, know this person is receptive to my feedback and is going to implement it. That they are like, okay, I have two options. I can say, here's the plus and minus of each one. But if you want advice and want me to tell you what to do, you better fucking do what I tell you, because otherwise you're wasting both of our time. So I've had people like send me things to read, which I almost never do, and they're like, "Oh, it's not done yet, but like blah blah, take a look." I'm like, "You do not. This is a real advice. This is professionalism from the inside the publishing world. Do not send something to someone to look over until it's as good as you can make it. If I am putting together your tuxedo for your wedding, it's different if I'm taking measurements, right? I have to stop and I have to get the tweaks, but I'm not sending you just nothing like half sewn and be like, well, you could visualize the rest. I'm not here to visualize the rest. I'm here to make it polished, to take it to the next level that you yourself don't have the skill or the back experience to do. Don't give it to me and expect me to do your work for you when I'm doing my work for you.
Yeah.
And
No,
this is
that's
something, it's not only that, it's not only that I resent it, they don't realize it comes off. It's a signal. There's a lot of signals in corporate America, and that includes publishing. There's lots of signals that this person is not a professional. And that's a big one. And right away, you know, this person doesn't know what they're doing, and you're not going to get people to return your calls.
Yeah. No, I think that's excellent advice. And it just like I said, it kind of smacks you in the face.
Yeah.
That's usually what good advice does.
Hey guys, Michael Malice here. Want to tell you about my favorite underwear, Sheath Underwear, SHEATH underwear.com. If you use code Malice20, you get 20% off. Okay, what is Sheath Underwear? I wear it exclusively now. They brought it to the studio. I'm like, what is this? Because it's underwear that is a brief, made with moisture wicking technology, so everything's breathable. But the key with sheath, they've got a kangaroo pouch for your Joey. They've got one pouch for your one part of your anatomy and another part of the pouch for the other part of your anatomy. It keeps it separate. And it sounds crazy. And I'm like, what is this? And now I wear it all the time because it is so fun and comfortable and a little bit subversive. It's like someone is grabbing onto your genitalia while you're talking in a business meeting, and you could sit there smiling and nodding because they don't know, but you know that you're wearing sheath underwear. If you go to sheathunderwear.com and use promo code Malice20, it's like a sheath. You get 20% off your order. They've got a line of underwear for women too. I don't know how that stuff works. Maybe there's something for the man in the boat. You'd have to ask them. Best part is they got started just like me on Kickstarter to launch Sheath. That's SHEATH underwear.com. Code Malice20 for 20% off. You can be in my underwear. You are welcome. What advice would you give to people who want to start out as comedians? Because I'm sure there's so many little, everyone wants to be a comic, right? I'm sure there's so many little rules that people aren't aware of when they start that you have to learn the hard way.
You know what I used to say a lot of times to people? They'd be like, what's your advice if I want to do stand-up comedy? And I would say, quit now.
Yeah.
That's my advice. And I always kind of justified it with like, first off, it would make people feel bad because that's not, like you said, a lot of times you're not really looking for advice. You're looking for validation. And I would just say, quit. That's my advice. You don't want to do this. Quit. And I always thought that it's like, well, if that actually led to you quitting, then you would never really wanted this that much anyway. And if you can't handle, and like getting used to handling rejection is a pretty big part of doing stand-up comedy. But really, the truth is that, and I know people are always disappointed in this, stand-up comedy is such a weird, unique field. And there's no right or wrong way to do it. I mean, if you just think about Sam Kinison and Jerry Seinfeld,
Yeah.
and how absolutely different they are. I mean, like, just like you see nothing in common at all. They have Rodney Dangerfield and Chris Rock, just completely. So it's not like there's one way to do it or not. The truth about stand-up comedy is that you have to understand that you need to go put yourself in incredibly uncomfortable situations. You need to go bomb at open mics, and you have to do that for years and years and years without expecting for anything to pay off. And that's really the only way to do it.
How do you transition from, what is the normal path to transition from that to being a working comic?
At a certain point, you start to make connections through doing that. So you start to meet people who run rooms and meet people who book different shows. And then you have to network enough, and you have to get yourself to a point where you're prepared enough to go start actually doing shows. But it happens. Everybody does it. You come into an open micer class, and then everyone little by little starts moving out of it, and you have to make connections with the other people. And then eventually you'll be ready to get seen by a booker at a club, and they'll audition you, hopefully.
So what happens then? So it's just, are you performing in front of one person?
Well, if it's no, not necessarily. I mean, they usually audition you by like throwing you on a shitty show at some point and giving you 6 minutes or something like that. And then if you do a decent enough job, they might start working you, and they'll start working you on the shittier shows. And then if you start
working you, they're hiring you?
Yeah, like booking you to do a spot on like a shitty show, you know, like a Sunday night late show or something like that. And then you have to do really good. And then maybe they'll start moving you into the better weekday shows, and then into ultimately the weekend shows. And then ultimately you want to be able to go headline. But the whole process is it's a lot. I mean, look, it's like getting good at anything.
Yeah.
It takes a very, very long time. There's nobody who's great at anything who hasn't been doing it for 15 years. I mean, you really just don't find that. I mean, there might be a couple exceptions, but those are the exceptions, not the rule. And it takes a long, long time to get good at something. My rule of thumb in general in life is it takes 10 years to be good at something and 20 to be great.
What was the line where you told yourself now that you could officially describe yourself as a comic?
I think it was when I started getting road work and started getting validation from the comedians I looked up to. that to me was like the sign of like what, like I worked with like Attell. I went out on the road with him a few times, and when he said a lot of nice things about my comedy, that's when I felt kind of like, oh, okay. And Big J was a big part of that for me too, and like guys like that who I really looked up to. And then when they kind of started validating me, I was like, okay, now I guess I'm making a little bit of money off this. I'm getting booked at things. I guess I can call myself a comedian.
Yeah, I've told this story before. Big J really hurt my feelings because I went with you, Lewis, and Big J at Caroline's. And I'm backstage with you guys, and I'd never met him before. And he came up to me, he's like, "Hey, Michael Malice." I'm like, "Oh, wow, that's so cool. Big J knows who I am." And it was really kind of like sweet. This is a few years ago. And then the next time I saw him, he's like, "Oh, nice to meet you." And I'm like, "God damn it." It was so like, I was, you could literally hear the air come out of a balloon. I was like, "Oh." I met you already. It was cool. I think he's so cool.
Yeah, Jay's the man.
Is he, I mean, is he as even keeled as he comes off?
No, he's a psychopath.
Oh,
No, Jay's a goddamn mess upstairs. But he is that guy, but then he's also, you know, a maniac in his head. But he'll tell you about that if you ask him.
there was I was talking on some of my live stream. I read this book about The View, the show The View, by and they interviewed everyone. Everyone talked on the record, and the show pretended the book never existed. And one of the executive producers said about that show, he goes, "You don't understand. The thing about Rosie O'Donnell, her biggest talent, is that she has convinced people that she's sane." He's like, "This woman she's not a bitch. She's profoundly mentally ill." And it's like, wow. And the thing is, you and I have been around enough people to know that a lot of times, most people, 90% I'd say, are exactly like you think they are off screen, right? They're very, very similar. But there's a few when you're like, oh, you're a legit crazy person. Like, not like, oh, you are crazy, or Tom's crazy, or like whatever, someone we don't like is crazy. Like, no, like certifiably crazy.
Yeah. I've known a couple in my day. That's really interesting though to hear about Rosie O'Donnell in that way. That show, The View, is like, I don't know, something. I would actually be interested to read that book because there's something fascinating about what an awful nightmare that
Yeah.
show is and how it continues to be on television.
Yeah, I mean, they go deep. So all the gossip is in there. It's a very quick read. There's the drama with Kathy Griffin. There's a drama with Elizabeth Hasselbeck, Rosie and Whoopi, Joy Behar and Megan. It's all in there. It's really, really good. I mean, I feel, I know, you know what? I'm going to say this. I was going to catch myself like, no, I want to piss off the audience because we were triggering like the rant people last time. Let's trigger all the ANCAPs. Meghan McCain, who I know you and her don't get along as much as I and her do. I think on a personality level, I get along with her very well. She really is. Someone had this great tweet where what makes Meghan McCain trend on Twitter is she just says things that like middle America thinks, and all the fucking like yentas on The View just lose their minds over it. And like then it just goes viral. And the thing that what's funny is people attack Meghan because they're like, oh, you only got hired because of your dad. And it's like, no. See, that's Abby Huntsman, who got hired because of her dad, John Huntsman, governor of Utah. And you don't know her name because she doesn't bring it. She's not on the show anymore. Whereas you know Meghan's name because she's getting heat. If anything, you could look at her as a heel, but she plays her part very well.
Yeah, that's probably fair. And the Abby Huntsman example is a good one. That kind of proves your point. Yeah, no, she does. She is very loud and opinionated and does a good job at creating those moments. By the way, I never had anything personally against Meghan. She was always nice to me. I literally think it's just my politics really bothered her. And I just wouldn't back down on being like hardcore anti-war. And that she like got offended several times about how, like she said at one point, I was on Kennedy with her and we were talking, I forget what exactly the topic was, but it was something about the wars. And I said that something about, I called the wars immoral. And I was like, these wars are just immoral. We go on these mass murder campaigns and destroy nations. And and you know, I go, there's the weapons companies that are making these crazy profits off of it, and it does nothing for America. And then she goes, at the end, after I was done with that, she goes, you know, I have family members who are currently serving in the military, and it is just so deeply offensive to them for you to refer to these wars as illegal. And I said, I referred to the wars as immoral, but they are also illegal. They have not one of them has been declared by Congress. And I could just see, and like Kennedy started laughing, and I could just see, I remember looking over at Megan and being like, yep, that's the moment. That is the moment when Megan McCain started hating me. And then at a certain point, she requested to not be on panels with me anymore. So, but what are you going to do?
The only time, and I don't understand how, I still don't. Well, maybe I have some theories, but like you and Tom Woods and Dave Rubin get so much more hate than I do when I'm a far bigger asshole than all three of you put together.
Yes,
and
there's something about you. It's very infuriating. You just skate by.
No. Like, I'm reading Ruben's book right now, and he has all the receipts about how they really go after him. And sure, part of it's the fact that he's a lot more prominent than I am, but the level of vitriol he gets is so off the chain. But also, like, the level, like, and again, like, me and Megan get on like fine. I'm pals with Ben. I got no beef with her. We're friendly. So it's just interesting that, you know, you and I have, I think, extremely close political views.
But I think I'm closer to you in that spectrum. Not quite as much as you, but I do in general kind of get along with everybody. Like Megan was the exception with me. Like I generally, I don't get nearly as much shit as some of the other guys do, which I've always kind of found strange too. Like, I don't know, I like within the libertarian world, like I get along with, you know, I like Matt Welsh and Nick Gillespie and all those guys, even though I'm kind of like a hardcore, you know, Mises Institute type. Like I do pretty well getting along with, you know, most.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So who knows how these? I think a lot of times they'll just fixate on someone, and you know that person will tend to be the target over time.
Yeah, I always found it strange with Tom, particularly like the people who have such like anger toward him, because Tom as a person is so hard to like object to. I mean,
Yeah,
he's just like
a nice guy.
He's just like a sweetheart guy. He's a dad. He's a Christian. He's a, you know, like he's like just not the guy you would think. But then there's a weird dynamic where he is, you know, like that, and I love this about people, but he is also like really hardcore in his own way.
Oh yeah,
so I've always liked people like that. Like I like something about like you know, like Ron Paul is like the most conservative person you could ever imagine, but then he's also like a bleeding heart. You know what I mean? Like I kind of like people who have those like different strands in them.
I'm gonna read you a quote because I want to watch you lose your shit.
Yeah.
Okay. So the Associated Press, which we all adore and have no shame, they did an article on the libertarian approach to the pandemic.
Saw this.
Okay, here we go. Good. And they quoted David Bose from the Cato Institute, and he said, I wouldn't say the article was, okay, how does like quarantine and like really strict restrictions of civil liberties, how do you reconcile with that libertarian principles, right? And Bose says, I wouldn't say we have trouble holding on to libertarian principles. We believe in the presumption of liberty, but that presumption can be overcome in particular circumstances, and that's part of our understanding of liberty. Thoughts?
So you don't believe in liberty? I mean, that's another way to say, you know, I believe in inalienable rights, but sometimes you have to alienate those from people. It's like, oh, okay. So, well, then you don't. I don't know what to tell you. Can you flesh this out for me a little bit? I mean, what exactly is the criteria for the situation when it's okay to suspend liberty? Like when exactly is that? Because basically that's what everyone believes. There's no difference between that and what Bernie Sanders believes. There's no difference between that and, right?
I said, this is almost verbatim of Warren quote, and then I found the Elizabeth Warren quote. This is what Elizabeth Warren, senator, had said. She said, I'm a capitalist. I believe in markets. What I don't believe in is theft. What I don't believe in is cheating. Fair. I'm with you. I'm with her. That's where the difference is. I love what markets can do. I love what functioning economies can do. They are what make us rich. They are what create opportunity. Yep, gotcha. But only fair markets. But only fair markets. Markets with rules. Markets without rules is about the rich take it all. It's about the powerful get all of it. That's what's gotten wrong with America. The term for markets without rules is what? That's right, freedom. She means laws, not rules. There are
Yes.
no markets without rules.
Yes, of course. And in fact, the idea that what we have is a market without rules is just so removed from reality. I mean, what we have is a market with so many rules that they've been able to game all of the rules in their favor. I mean, look, it's this is almost, it reminds me of just like people who claim the term minarchist in general. And when you say like, well, I want like the smallest possible government, and then you just have to realize that that's what everyone wants.
Yeah, Stalin's for that.
Stalin is a minarchist. Bernie Sanders is a minarchist. They're all minarchists. They want the smallest government possible. They're just disagreeing about what that is.
Yeah.
And what the role of government should be. So there's really no, it's just like that, like this David Boas crap, man. It's like he just represents the absolute worst of the libertarian movement. It's people who, it reminds me of the Gary Johnson thing, where Gary Johnson would say, he'd go, you know, I think that pot should be legal because the government has no right to, you know, it's like quote a Milton Friedman thing, but like the government has no right to tell you what goes into your body any more than they tell you what comes out of your mouth. And you own your body, so you should be able to put in it whatever they want. And then someone would be like, so are you saying heroin should be legal? Because I know someone who died from heroin. And you go, well, maybe not heroin, you know, blah, blah. It goes, but so where did all your principles just go? You just basically told everyone you don't really believe the government shouldn't regulate what goes in your mouth any more than what comes out of your mouth. You don't believe people own their own bodies. You just think weed's an issue that people won't object to that much. So the same thing with this David Boas quote. It's you basically just said that you don't believe in any of this stuff because all it needs, it's like, so where, like, that's why you have to know what your criteria is, because where would you draw that line? So, okay, so because of the coronavirus, which by the way is now projected 60,000 people are going to die from it. Okay, so because of that, yes, in the US. Sorry, it should be clear, in America. So because of that, we can curtail liberties. But what about a flu that's going to kill 40,000 people? Or what about, you know what I'm saying? Like, what
if everyone just gets a stomach ache and no one dies?
Yeah. Then what do we get to do? Like, what is your guiding principle through all of this? And the idea that libertarians just believe in a presumption of liberty. I mean, who claims they don't?
I covered this in my book. I called it the pistachio paradox, where I said if Nancy Pelosi has 4 principles, right? And the fourth is, and like, let's suppose like ice cream, right? If it's strawberry, then vanilla, chocolate, and the fourth is pistachio. And 2/3 of the time she chooses chocolate, and 2/3 of the remaining time she chooses strawberry, and 2/3 of the remaining time she chooses vanilla, and 2/3 of the remaining time she chooses pistachio, she'll end up choosing pistachio once a year, right? And it's like she will tell you with a straight face it's one of her top values, and she'll be logically accurate, but somehow it's never gets chosen. This is a little paradox that they have. And it's the same thing, like, yeah, Marx said the state's going to wither away and we're going to live in a state of anarchy. Sure, you could call Marx an anarchist, but Marxism is not anarchism in this sense that they're talking about. So it's when people say things like this, it's also de facto, I feel, and I'm sure you agree, this claim that what we're being presented as needs to restrict our liberty are coming from a place of honesty and truth and concern for our well-being, and will be executed in such a way as to deliver our well-being. And all the evidence, or the vast majority of the evidence, has been to the complete contrary on all of those counts.
Yes. No, I completely agree. That's a great way to put it. And on top of that, I would just say that, you know, if you are not willing to defend your principles when it's difficult to do so, then you don't have principles. Then you don't, and then you're useless to your principles. Like, who cares? It's like somebody, you know, Tom Woods had this great, one of my favorite thing, I would say my favorite thing Tom ever wrote was in Real Dissent. Do you remember the passage that he had about being against slavery? And basically his argument was, he said, it's very, very easy to be against slavery today.
Yeah.
Like, that means nothing. If you are against slavery today, it means less than nothing, because slavery was abolished in 1865. It ain't coming back anytime soon. Everyone agrees with you. I mean, I don't know, the 0.00001% of the population who's still for slavery. It's like almost nobody. He goes, and there's no risk. But if you were against slavery in 1845, that really meant something. Or and he goes through like numbers, and he's like, the abolitionists would get like less than 2% of the vote. And
I'm looking right now. I have above me in my office a Hall of Heroes. So it's 4 autographed things of probably my 4 favorite people. And on the left, it's David Bowie, the Heroes album. And to his right, this was Spite funded. It's Andy Kaufman signed dressed as Elvis. Then the last one is a piece of Alexander Hamilton's hair. I'm not joking. But third is William Lloyd Garrison, who was the great abolitionist. And in the 1830s, I believe it was, he was in Boston advocating for abolition. They stormed the building. It's still there. And they almost killed him.
Yes.
And the argument wasn't even that they were for slavery. They're like, we have a delicate agreement with the South. You're a fucking troublemaker. You're making drama of everyone. You know perfectly well that these Africans can't live with us. So this is their solution. Sit down and shut the fuck up. And in many ways, it's the same verbiage, I'm sure, that you would see today on Facebook and Twitter from blue-pilled people. Like, this is the deal. We have a stable situation. And here you are with your uppity views, trying to make trouble for everyone. Sit down and be quiet. We were trained to know what we know.
Yes. So to stand up in the face of those very real threats, and not just the physical threats, but the social ostracism and the just everything, like, that takes real courage, and that means something. And in the same way that you'd go like, it's very easy to be against the war in Iraq today. Even John McCain wrote in his book that he, was against the war in Iraq at this point. And so, but in 2002, in 2003, it was really hard to do that. So all that matters, if you care about principles, is who's willing to stand up for them when it's actually difficult to do so. And that David Bowes quote just basically lets you know, he's like, hey, I have these principles, but if it's kind of difficult to stand up for them right now, then I could just run away from them, and that's no problem. Like, if you're gonna call me a bad person, then I'll just run away. And then when you think about it in comparison to like what the abolitionists were dealing with, it's like, it really isn't even asking you to risk that much to stand up for them now. This is nothing. So I could be damn sure you wouldn't actually stand up for them if you actually had to risk something.
So I had a poll question. I want to hear your answer. If we're in a parallel universe, Republican Senate, Democrat House, like we have now, but Hillary's president, do you think the stimulus bill would have been higher, lower, or the same?
The same.
I think it'd be lower.
Huh.
I think
Maybe.
Republicans, when they're in opposition, they like to act like budget hawks.
Yeah, I mean,
and they grow their testicles.
I suppose there's some truth to that, but the reason why I go with the same is that I really think those differences are in rhetoric only. I think that when it actually came down to it, the Republicans, certainly they'll talk a lot more about big government when Obama was the president, but every single time it'd be like, oh my God, the government's going to shut down and we only have 2 weeks to come up with this continuing resolution, and they'd end up setting record high spending. It's not as if spending ever went down under Obama. They'd always end up kind of giving it to them. And I really do think in these situations, it's all run by their corporate interests and it's all run by lobbyists, and basically the same bill was going to get in there. I do think that Hillary Clinton in some ways may have, I don't know. I was going to say, because it would just be a different side that would see it as corrupt. But I really don't think there would be much difference in this emergency situation. I think they would try to do exactly what they did.
That's it. Yeah. I mean, again, what's amazing about hypothetical situations like this, and I love the comments, is that everyone loses their mind and they're like, well, it obviously would blah, 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 blah. And it's like, when you're talking about obvious, when something has this many moving parts, it's not really this simple. And neither of us are saying it, we know for
the only way to know for sure would be to have an alternate universe and run this experiment, and we don't have that.
And we don't know that if we ran it again, she would have the same result. It could be Hillary was slept on the wrong side of the bed and she's asking for more money. So even that, one of the things that triggers me is when all the polls said Hillary had a 99% chance to win, and then Trump wins, and that shows that those polls were totally off. It's like, no, it's possible that she had a 99 chance to win, and he fucking drew the hat trick. Like, that's how statistics work.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of the other, I mean, so it's not as screwed up as people tend to think. You'd have to run the experiment, over and over to see it. But that also reminds me of all these people. This also drives me crazy. These binary thinkers who think Trump can't lose, and it's like when you have two parties, lots of stuff could happen.
Yeah, and also the fact that we're not living in anything close to 1984, and I don't mean the book, I mean the movie. I don't mean the book, I mean
oh
the
my
year.
God, that was so funny. I don't mean the book, I mean the movie. I've never read the book. The movie with the Eurythmics.
No, I mean the year, 1984, where you're not winning a landslide like Reagan did.
Doing this.
There we go. No, but I just mean that the country is so polarized and so split up into red and blue states that there are these states that just aren't budging. There's just no way New York or California could go red. It just can't happen. And Donald Trump, I think people also really do. What Donald Trump pulled off in 2016 was, I mean, he won every swing state that he needed to by razor thin margins. It's far from a guarantee. I mean, if you had just had that election again the next day or the day before, it's quite possible Hillary Clinton takes it. So I think nothing is a guarantee. It is working in Trump's favor that he is running against a legitimate senile person this time. So if I'm still on the fence, I think they might fucking find a way to get Joe Biden out of there. But
I agree. If they were, first of all, the binary thinkers can't handle having positive attributes ascribed to their enemies. So if you say that, this person is smart, it's like, oh, she's an idiot. It's like, okay, let's calm down. The DNC are smart in this regard. They kind of stole the nomination from Bernie, because they got the message out. They sat down with Klobuchar. They sat down with Buttigieg. They say, here's what's going to fucking happen. Tomorrow, Super Tuesday, Bernie's leading in every single state. You're going to quit right now. You're going to get on TV. You're going to get your ass on a fucking plane, and you're going to endorse him. And they said, yes, sir. And all the voters got the message. That was a smart move on them. Now they're stuck with him because he is better than Bernie, I think, in many ways. In many ways, he's worse, but whatever. They decided he's their man. He's certainly better for their corporate sponsors. That's no question there. But now it's like, all right, it's April, elections in November. We're in the middle of a crisis. This guy's is out of his mind. And I don't know if you saw that ad that Trump launched last week. I've never seen anyone nuked as hard.
It's devastating.
No, the only ad I've seen that's as hard, surprisingly, was the Ron Paul ad against Newt Gingrich in 2012. Where he just goes step by step with Gingrich quotes and just calls him a total phony and corrupt. And you're watching this and you're like, stop it, he's already dead. And the fact that it came out of the Ron Paul campaign, I'm like, oh my God, because Ron Paul's such a nice guy.
Yeah.
I think they are smart enough and they could get it over with their people to put in somebody else.
I think no question that if I were one of these like big wig Democratic donors or some real, like kingmaker, powerful person in the party, I would be sitting down in one of those smoke-filled rooms and saying, okay, the end result is Biden is out and Cuomo is in. What's step one?
Yeah, right.
How do we get there? Because that is where we're going. There is no question about this. That is where we're going. Now, how do we make that happen? What's the first step toward getting to that end? Because there is no way we can have Joe Biden in the fallout of this crisis going. You look right now, Cuomo's on TV every day. He's
87%, I think it is.
Yes, he's seeming presidential. He's doing all these things. He's being a leader. While Joe Biden is, and I mean, look, it's funny because me and you, like, we make fun of all these people all the time, but you can't overstate it with Joe Biden. Joe Biden, if he is asked a question, the best case scenario for Joe Biden is he says something incomprehensible. That's like the best he could pull off. It's like, well, he didn't stutter and he didn't stumble. He didn't just give up in the middle of it. He answered. It didn't make any sense, but hey, he did say words for 3 straight minutes that were actual words. That he is so, I mean, when you're looking for the alpha leader, especially in a crisis, that's a really big problem. And so I just have a tough time seeing him, imagining him getting on a debate stage with Trump.
What about Dave? Imagine him getting through his speech at the convention.
Yeah.
Even if there's a teleprompter, he's still fucking it up.
Oh, no question. No, I mean he can't give a 3 minute speech without fucking it up. So I can't imagine him actually having to give a half hour.
Yeah. Well, hopefully we get to see it. But I
That
agree
would be
with you.
fun.
I agree with that. Is a really that was a really smart way of putting it. I didn't realize that myself. That they're gonna sit down. They're like, all right, cut the shit, guys. Like, here's how it's gonna be. You all know what the fuck is going on. This is ridiculous. We're not having this. Trump made this point that I thought was really smart. He goes, why hasn't Obama endorsed Biden yet? And
That
that's a
is
really interesting question.
That is a very, very interesting question. And it was interesting from the beginning because, I mean, Joe Biden was his guy and he is running on the Obama legacy because that's the only thing he has to run on.
And the crime
Um,
bill, and it's
well,
Clarence Thomas, right? Yeah,
yeah, I mean,
and the war in Iraq. Yeah,
yeah, he'd rather walk away from those things and just run on I was Obama's VP. I was there. That's Joe Biden's pitch. I was there and I'm a return to a pre-Trump
yeah, era. Yeah,
world.
yeah, 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 yeah.
That's his pitch. And that almost demands an Obama endorsement in order to sell it. I'm bringing you back to the Obama years. Well, then you need Obama on board with that. And the fact that he didn't endorse him, going into Super Tuesday, I was really surprised about that they got everybody else to.
Yeah.
And I think it's that, I think it's as simple as Obama doesn't want to endorse someone who might fall completely flat on their face before we even get to election day.
Bernie has just endorsed Biden as we're taping this Monday afternoon. I am just laughing at how fucking clumsy Elizabeth Warren is, because she had some leverage and she didn't play any of it. And now Sanders endorsed Biden. She's got no leverage. Everyone will see her as a snake and as pathetic. And like, you blew it, Liz. You were considered the one who's going to unite the party and the alternative to Biden. Now you're a laughing stock and a joke. And it's really kind of, it couldn't happen to a nicer lady.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I think that Elizabeth Warren, this election cycle marked a change in her political career going forward, whereas she was a fake progressive for years, and now she is just an establishment Democrat, and I
Yeah.
think everybody sees that. I think that the left realizes that she doesn't actually care about any of the progressive values. She is simply of and by and for the establishment. If she cared about any of these values, of course she would have supported Bernie Sanders. I mean, if you really care about Medicare for all, and you really care about raising the minimum wage, and you really care about forgiving student loan debt, well, you had the best shot you've ever had to get a guy who believes in those things the nomination. But you wouldn't endorse him, and you even stayed in the race and continued to attack him, robbing him of his best chance. So she's been out, and I also think that Bernie Sanders has been exposed to a
Yeah.
large degree. I see a lot of the Sanders supporters really having a moment of disillusion where they're realizing that there's something that doesn't add up with Bernie Sanders, and it's simply, you can't say the political system is so rotten that we need a revolution. Like that's your starting point, is the establishment is so messed up, we need a revolution. But of course, I can't actually criticize them to their face, and I will endorse them when the time comes. Well, then why the hell would we need a revolution?
Right. And yeah. And the other thing, but the Warren, though, is even though she's shown herself to be a fake progressive, she's not even a good establishment Democrat. Because the good establishment Democrats were the Klobuchar and Buttigieg, who fell in line very publicly, said yes, sir, and not only did they do what they were ordered, they delivered. So it was of value to the party.
Yes, but there's different roles that different people within the establishment play, right? So the role that Elizabeth Warren was supposed to play, and the role that Bernie Sanders is now supposed to play, is to get the left half of the Democratic supporters on board, enthusiastic, and then channel them into the corporate Democrat. And that's the role that Bernie Sanders is supposed to play too. Bernie Sanders is supposed to get these young people out and registered and in the mood to vote, and then funnel all of that into Hillary Clinton and now Joe Biden. And they don't like Bernie Sanders because he's not doing a very good job of doing it.
Dave, we're running out of time. What has been your favorite part of this interview?
just seeing your handsome face in these dark, dark days.
You are welcome.